All right. Well, let's get into things. So, the little blonde Dutch girl, right? Who wants to begin? And if you want to share overarching thoughts, it's okay, but I would love to hear if you have any thoughts about specific passages. Does anyone have a burning desire?
I'll go and share just a couple of thoughts.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm happy to share a beautiful case. Tons that I learned from and could apply to my cases and some problems I've been having this week. One thing that I think that just came up for me when I did read it was how different reading his case here is from watching usually when people present.
Hmm.
That there's a lot more history here and the putting together of the pieces of the history, the linking it to the points of the triangle very early on,
Hmm.
and not so much pressure and challenge, which is a lot of times when you see tapes, people showing tapes, what tends to get shown is more of the pressure and challenge. So it was just something I noticed, and I suppose I took away about how much work can get done without heavy pressure and challenge. So that was a thought I had.
Can you imagine that? ISTDP without exclusive pressure and challenge. How about that? How about that? Thanks, Max. Really appreciate that point. Still letting people in. Anybody else? Does anybody want to riff off of what Max said? Did you all notice that too? That it was different from what we see in a lot of workshops?
I'll speak a little bit. Sorry, guys. I'm in my car. I hope the audio is okay.
Oh, Harrison, there you
Harrison
are.
here.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Go, go.
So yeah, I was kind of going off of what he said to let's see, the page here, 106. Though the tone is always gentle, the language is extremely confronting, giving the patient no chance to escape from the impact of what he is saying. And kind of going off of what we talked about last time as well, and
Mhm.
kind of what voice we kind of project onto Davanloo in the transcripts. At least here, he's explicitly acknowledging the need for a gentle tone,
Yeah.
which I think is so important. And um, others may have a better idea on how Davanloo himself changed over the years, but
Mhm.
I happened to be reading a chapter in the Green Book on challenge recently, and it was funny because in a transcript there, the patient directly says, "No, it's not what you're saying. It's your tone of how you're saying it that I have a problem with." So it's just it's so different reading this
Yeah.
versus some of his later papers on kind of the importance of tone. So I
Oh,
just wanted to say that.
I really appreciate that point. Yeah, with major mobilization, major rapid mobilization of the unconscious, which came later in his work, the tone becomes firm and not gentle. And it's actually an important component of the technique. But what a mistake to think it should always be that way. Like, yeah, definitely there's room for there's a time and place for a gentle tone for sure. Thanks for that, Harrison. I appreciate it. Anybody else, either about what we're talking about or something else about the transcript or a passage from the transcript? And hi, Iona and Britton and Justin. Hey, and Bert. It's good to see you guys.
Nice to see you, Johanna.
Thanks. Yes, Rachel.
Yeah, just quickly, like building on what Max was saying, I think I also really took from this. Oh, can you hear me okay?
There's some sort of echo.
Yeah, I hear that too.
It
It's better
means we
now.
need to mute our
Yeah, if
microphones,
everybody
please.
could mute except Rachel, that'd be great.
Um, so just I'm it's helping me shift my perspective from like one of like trying to jump on every defense to like what's the minimum amount of pressure necessary to get to the unconscious, to get, to be in a collaborative flow with the patient. So that's been really helpful.
Right. As long as there is progression, as long as there is movement, there's not necessarily a need to jump on every defense. Exactly that. Exactly. Great. Glad you.
Can I say something about what Rachel just said? Is that okay?
Yes.
I love what you just said, Rachel. It's like initially you're like, what's the most I can do, right? And you sort of overdo it as we're learning the model, I think, from myself anyway. But then you go, hang on. It's actually I'm asking myself the wrong question. It's not what's the maximum I can do, it's what's the minimum I can do. So I love the way you rephrase that there.
Yeah. Sometimes less is more, eh? Yeah. Thanks, Amen.
Oftentimes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm an old overfunctioner myself. I used to overfunction, not just as a therapist, but in life. I can totally relate. Good, good. Anybody else? And it doesn't have to be about this. It could be about any other passage.
Okay. Can I talk since somebody else is? Yeah.
Bert, you're up. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I'm just hearing what people are saying there, and where he says in this article, the evaluator makes no attempt to interpret this defense. I'm constantly challenged by too much, too little, too fast, too slow.
Mm.
I'll be honest with you. I recently showed one of my videos to 3 different supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
And I got 3 different comments on speed and how fast and slow I'm going.
3 different opinions.
Yeah.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
understand? Like, why aren't you saying something about the defense?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you're talking too much about defenses. You're interpreting too much.
Yes.
Or, so what I'm saying is that it gets, maybe I make my own confusion by having too many supervisors, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
I'm constantly challenged and somewhat confused about exactly what is the technique, exactly how do I know, and it's not a matter of perfection or idealism. It's just that you want to have maximum benefit for the client. How do I know that I'm practicing the right technique? How do I know that I'm going at the right speed, wrong speed, too much, too little?
Yeah. Yeah. Justin and then Iona, but yes, Bert. And if I have contributed to confusion in my supervision of you, I apologize. Um, we'll do um, we'll do Justin and then Iona.
Hi. Um, just a couple of a couple of things that were sort of converging on a single point that he wrote early on in the article, where he was talking about something I think that we hear a lot about, which is the response to interpretation being a sort of part of how we're evaluating whether someone's appropriate, the selection criteria.
Prognosis.
I was thinking a lot about that and how that connects to a few things. He talks about it a little bit later, more specifically, where he talks about specifically how when they get to the anger and the transference and how making links on the triangle person and how the responsiveness to that in particular is pretty important.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I also happened upon a video by Viktor Frankl last night where he's talking about the will to meaning. I found that kind of interesting, well, coming from an ISTDP perspective. So I'm thinking about all those things together and how just how motivated a client is to take what you're giving to them as far as an interpretation or a triangle connection and like really making a meaning out of it, and like how important, how central that seems to be. That was just really striking me last night.
Wow, I had not made that link myself. That's super cool. Yeah, the thing about the prognostic indicator of triangular person interpretations, I think that came from Alexander and French in 1946. They called it the total interpretation when you check all corners, the transference of the current and the past. So I think it came from them. But yeah, no, I tend to put stock in that. I tend to think there's something to that. Iona and then Robert.
I just want to respond to what Bert said, if that's okay. I had an idea when he was just asking that question. Bert, are you open to my answer? And what I've learned from my amazing teacher along the way, um, is that how do we know if it's too much or too little? You look to the client for that information. They tell you right in the moment if they sigh, if they turn towards you, if something good happens, it was right on. If they move away, if they don't sigh, if they go back into it wasn't. So I think it's a moment to moment course correction. That's what I think is the answer. It's not a supervisor that can give you the answer. It's your client, as you always say, Johannes, who's the best teacher, who in that moment will tell you if that was too much, too little, or just right. Is that fair to?
Well, no arguments for me, for sure. That's for sure. Let's see. Bo, I think. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Iona, I thought that was a beautiful point, and thanks for the kind words. You give me too much credit, but thank you.
Not enough credit.
You're kind. Yeah, Robert, how about you?
My thoughts also go to what Bert was saying, and but also linking very clearly to the YouTube video that you produced and showed,
Mhm.
Johannes. Thank you for that. I really note the sense of the therapist and the intuition of the therapist, the countertransference, and the countertransference is going to be uniquely different to each of us as a therapist. So you're experiencing, I believe, Bert, the supervisor's internal mechanism as well as what you're doing, and the problem comes when I want to listen to what's going on in me, but how much of that is my clinical experience and how much of that is my own personal transference reactions to whatever's going on? And it's such a quandary, but it's a really valuable thing to be using. I am using here to read you. And how accurate is my reading? Well, I think what you say, Aaron, is really important. I've got to watch the client, interpret, feel the client. Am I on it with them or am I not on it? I think,
Mm.
anyway, I thought.
I think that's a lovely point, Robert. Wow, thank you for that. Robert, do you think that the barometer of the countertransferential felt sense, do you tend to put stock in that? Do you think it's reliable?
I'm using it like a compass all the
Yeah.
time, and
Mm.
sometimes I'm way out and it goes wrong. I
Mhm.
have to go, oh my gosh, I just broke it. Let's work to get back into connection with this person. Sometimes I have no idea why I went in a particular direction, and I'm rewarded by the person breaking into tears, for example. So, but sometimes it just goes completely flat. I miss. So.
Yeah. Oh, that happens for me too.
mm.
Yeah.
I think another on that way that as I get older,
Mhm.
which I am, which we all are, but I think I'm winning for most of us here. My mental acuity is slower, but my wisdom understanding is improving. So there's this combating inner conflict, if you like, between where I'm going and how well I'm going there.
Oh, well, I'm picking up on some wisdom. Thank you very much for sharing.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I think it's Justin, and then we can go to Boo's comment here. Or unless the hand, that's an old hand. That was an old hand. Okay, never mind. Uh, and how do I pronounce your name? Is it Boo or Bo? How do I pronounce it? Boo. You're muted. Boo. Is he not hearing me? Boo. You're muted. You got to unmute. There.
Sorry, I couldn't find the button again
Oh,
to
oh,
unmute
oh. How do I
it.
pronounce your name?
It's Bo, the second one you said.
Bo.
Yep.
Bo. Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, do you want to speak to what you wrote?
Yeah, I just just what I was listening to what Justin was saying there, and it made me think of the last couple articles we covered, and I was struck by how quickly they were ready to just rule, that second case, the one with the female, as just not congruent, right? That's not a good case, not suitable, not fit for ISTDP.
Mm.
And I felt quite strikingly different, right? I felt like she was a very good candidate,
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
in this current one, they were talking about, a lot of, and I know, or at least I've heard with Davanloo that, sometimes other people are writing his transcripts, that kind of stuff. So you don't know who you're getting sometimes. But, early on, they're talking about a lot of diffuse anxiety with the little blonde Dutch girl. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I don't know if we're quite into that diffuse anxiety yet kind of stuff. And,
Mm.
um, but just I just thought that was really, really interesting that they were ready to just, kind of kick her to the side and say, no, no go. She's not a good candidate. And there was very few that were saying, yeah, yeah, let's go. Green
Yeah.
light with her.
That's right. I agree. I totally disagreed with those sentiments too. But both Davanloo and Mallon were all about, no, this is a good candidate, right? As far as I recall.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's what you wrote about here. Thanks. Thanks, Bo. Appreciate it. Very good. Let's see. Anybody else want to share something? Thoughts, reflections, reactions, disagreements, concerns? Okay.
I
Well,
just,
yeah, go.
sorry, I forgot to raise my hand there. Just what you were talking about last time with the last group, Johannes, like kind of noticing just little flares or um, little tidbits, right? Signs of being able to notice where the unconscious is starting to speak a little bit, right? Maybe even kind of what Alan says, the whispers, kind of so to speak. I know you were talking about that a little last time. I was noticing trying to look for that this time a little bit, kind of thing, and I feel like I can catch sometimes the obvious things, but when I critique myself, sometimes more of the subtle things.
Mhm.
With that, I can't seem to find. So if you, I'd be interested in anybody else that might have seen some of that as was going
Oh,
along.
oh, that's a
Just
beautiful
specific.
question. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a beautiful question. Um, I mean, off the top of my head, it's the obvious signs that the patient is really collaborating and sharing in a forthcoming way, information that is psychodynamically significant and rich. That's like the most obvious low-hanging fruit evidence of UTA in operation. But in terms of specific passages, I don't have it here. We could look for it for sure. So if someone has that, then
Could you
yes.
just repeat what you said? I'm sorry, Johannes. You said what is the most evident low-hanging fruit? Sorry.
When the patient is genuinely collaborating, as opposed to say just being compliant, defensively compliant, but genuinely collaborating, offering spontaneous, sometimes even prompted, but definitely spontaneous. That's always a good sign when you see spontaneous sharing of information that is revealing as opposed to concealing or obfuscating. Okay. And okay. So yeah, just do feel free. Just raise your hand if you have something. While we're waiting, I'll just share that one of the things that stood out to me as pretty interesting was on page 121 and then on page 122. At the bottom of page 121, the therapist now knows that therapeutically speaking, it will be crucial to reach her feelings about the loss of the close relation with her father, if possible, through, I think he meant to say, reliving recollected detail. But he is not yet ready to attempt this. He, meaning Davanloo himself. He's not yet ready to attempt this. He still wants to fill in detail about relations within the family and therefore asks first about the relation that her patients had to one another. I'm sorry, that her parents had to one another, and then about the relation between the patient and her mother. So that was at the bottom of page 121. And then in the middle of page 122, he has gotten some of that information, and then he writes, and whenever her father was away, she used to stay out of the house a lot, riding her bike, which was her favorite pastime. Now, at last, it is time to focus on the point at which her relationship with her father deteriorated. And so it's puzzling to me as to why suddenly it was the right time after he had gotten that information. Like it's just not clear to me, and I'm left.
Yeah, I
Who's speaking?
Well, I was just going to say, I thought you had an interesting slip when you said patients instead of parents, because that's what it speaks to for me was his patience and not saying, "Oh, how do you feel right now?" and going to pressure and challenge. Now, how he knew how to do that,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I don't know either. Maybe that was part of his genius, or maybe also, as one is wont to do, they make themselves look better when they rewrite the thing. I had it planned. I knew what I was doing all along.
Yeah.
But ultimately, yeah, I find myself a lot like as soon as you see any feeling, or what are you feeling right now, and then pressure and challenge. But something he seems to be doing here is holding back and letting the whole picture form.
Mm,
That's what I learned from that for myself was
yeah.
you can wait, get the full picture, and
Yeah.
that's what happens in this case. I think for me that was really astounding was how much of the full family picture and all the dynamics he gets
Mhm.
before he's pursuing the breakthrough. So.
Mm, love that. I so agree with that. Love that. Thanks. Leslie, you're up.
Hi. Yeah, I feel like the more I read and the more I learn, the less I find transcripts helpful.
Mm,
And I feel like with regards to this particular point, I think like the whole intuition and everything, I
mhm,
think it's probably not on the page. It's probably in the tone of voice. It's
mhm,
probably in the general like increase in the relationship between the two people.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
there's so much nonverbal that goes on in this training.
Yeah.
Not on the page. Like they put he puts the size and a couple other things, and when she's obviously crying,
Mhm,
but most people don't just start crying. They'll have a little break in the voice, or they'll
mhm,
have a little bit of this or that, and
mhm.
all of those little hints aren't there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I want to still keep reading them, but at the same time, I really feel like, like there's something that's missing a lot in these
Mhm,
in just the words on the page.
mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a really good point. Thank you, Leslie. Great point. Vanessa.
Hi, yeah. So I've been thinking since I read this a lot about intuition because it was referenced a bunch in this case, and I've been wondering lately, well, actually, it's made me think a lot about learning ISTDP and teaching ISTDP and how that's really, really going to be tough to learn. But I was wondering if maybe the intuition is actually like a way of listening to and coding unconscious communication,
Mm,
through things like body language and size and verbal, understanding things in the manifest content, so I'm wondering if that's really like when you're just so good at that, if then it translates to intuition. Um,
right,
that's what
right.
I've been thinking about.
Yeah, yeah, I am familiar with that understanding of intuition. And but I think like there's this one passage where he talks about, I don't know where'd you go? You're here
Oh,
somewhere.
sorry, I put
Oh,
the
here.
hand down.
Yeah, there's a passage where he talks about his creative free association and that the therapist has a right to do that as much as the patient. So he goes somewhere apparently without any empirical basis. And that is consistent with what I've heard from some others that there's something about his unconscious syncing up with the patient's unconscious that isn't necessarily about empiricism and reading this or that cue, but just something truly unconscious. So that's a different idea of intuition at work, but I totally understand what you said, and I'm sure that's partly the case for sure. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I think Stephen.
Can you hear me? I guess. I
Yes.
guess you can. Okay, great. Okay, my apologies. Just need to make sure that I plug in my laptop before my battery dies.
Hmm.
Good. I'm good to go. Okay. Um, I'm feeling a little bit of shame, I guess, or self-consciousness, I guess, is what you would be calling it in the common parlance about being able to say what I'm about to say now, because I thought I've got nothing to contribute to this conversation at this moment.
Hmm.
But now I finally have got my brain back together again. I would share this with everyone, but I'm kind of thinking like, Steve, why are you telling this to everybody in the group? You're preaching to the choir. They already know this. So all I would bring up here in this moment is just simply about the dynamic of the sibling rivalry that happens between the little blonde Dutch girl and her younger sister, or her younger sister, my apologies. Just because, I guess possibly because I've had a lot of clients myself in my experience who've had siblings, and there's been sibling rivalry. In fact, I have a client right now who's got some sibling rivalry that he's dealing with his sister. And I guess about the sibling rivalry piece is you can call it, sometimes you call it horizontal aggression. Right. But she says early in the passage, or Davanloo writes early in the passage, something about when she was in the front seat, I suppose, or in the back seat. I can't remember if she was in the front seat or the back seat. She was in the preferred position, whatever it is, the loved position.
Yes.
She's the youngest. She's the baby. Then all of a sudden she's displaced. She's dethroned because this other baby has come along, which is her younger sister. And she says, oh, I hate her. Right. And then later on, they're playing a game later on when she's older with her sister, whereby they imagine that they play dead. And later on, what happens is her poor dear sister does, in fact, actually die. And, you know, I've explained to clients in some ways, when you're a child and you've got parents, if you're a child, you have zero power within the relationship, within the family dynamic. You have zero power because the parents have all the money. They have a job, they have a driver's license, they have an education, they've got problem solving skills, they've got a whole bunch of resources at their disposal that you don't have. So the child is utterly and completely dependent upon the parent to make sure that you love me. You love me, because if I'm not loved, oh shit, excuse my French, oh shit, I'm going to die. I'm going to be put outside on the street with the wolves, right? And so there's, you know, the child does not know consciously, how does my food come about? They just know that mommy, if we go for gender stereotypes, okay, so just bear with my gender stereotypes. If I know that mommy goes into that little room over there where there's lots of steam and smoke and grease coming out, and all of a sudden she comes out and there's a plate full of food and she plops it in front of me, right? Or I know that, you know, I go to a department store and I get some clothing and daddy plops down this little piece of plastic on the counter, and then I have my clothing. So they don't really, I don't think that children really can make that connection, but they know I would say possibly at an unconscious level, well, I didn't work the job to earn the money to be able to buy this clothing. I know that I didn't go into the kitchen to make the dinner or the lunch or whatever it might be. So they know that unconsciously that they're dependent upon somebody else who's stronger, has more resources, more intelligent, to be able to take care of their needs. And if that person doesn't love them, oh boy, excuse my French, they're fucked, right? And so if this new creature comes along, which is a cute little baby girl, and she's just lovely and adoring and everything else, and we just love her to bits, right? Then, oh, I'm being displaced. Oh, is my position within the family at risk? And so there'll be some, I would think there'd be some unconscious resentment or anger or some kind of a threat from this new little baby that comes into the family. And so, but the thing is, this is what I've said to clients. No, you know, if you get angry directly at your parents, right, and you say, well, I don't like you because you like my younger sister better, you like my younger brother better, is that going to bring you closer to your parents, or is it going to push your parents further away from you? Because you need to ensure that strong connection, that strong attachment with them, just for your own pure survival.
I think you're making really, really good points. That's very, very sensible. And it sounds to me like you have a lot of empathy for the patient when it comes to what she experienced in terms of being displaced or dethroned. I think those were your words.
Yeah, dethroned in some ways, because the baby is always, oh, that's the baby of the family. She gets treated, or he gets treated like gold, right? And so I think in some ways what happens is, well, I can't be angry or aggressive directly at the parent, but I can be angry or aggressive at the sibling.
Right. Safer. Yeah, that's right. And so some of the anger towards the parents could be displaced on the sibling. Absolutely. I think you have a really, really good grasp on all of this and tremendous empathy for her.
But unfortunately, I have a feeling that maybe I'm preaching to the choir. So I feel that my point is just like, well, Steve, we already know that.
No, I appreciate it, how much empathy you're displaying and the reminder of the dynamics you're referring to. I thank you for it, Steve.
But when I tell clients that, they kind of, oh, all right, okay. So that's why, for example, when somebody dies, and you know, just to bring this into popular culture, if I can for a moment, would be allowed? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's this silly little song that what's her name comes out with, the one Taylor Swift,
Mhm.
which I thought was a great little video, but only because of the lyrics that was going into it, which is the fact that she is talking about how she's the evil individual within the family dynamic, but also the other piece that comes up about it is about, if I don't get the love that I want in the relationship, in the family relationship, as I'm growing up, especially if I'm the middle child, because that's usually the rebel child, if I don't get it, by Christ in heaven, I want to make damn sure that I get my money at the end of the day. In other words, whatever is in the will that's owed to me, I better damn well make sure that I get it, because I sure as hell didn't get the love when I was growing up as a child or as an adolescent.
Right.
And that most definitely has come up with the client that I've been working with recently, who has a struggle with his sibling, his sister, because his sister has communicated in some ways to her, to him rather, why are you asking about how much money is in mom's account? It's like, well, I'm just asking because, this money is going to take care of mom. And he couldn't understand why it is that his sister was having such a conniption about the fact he's the youngest, obviously, why she was having such a conniption about the fact that he wanted to know rather where mom's money was. And I said, well, that's because this is the dynamic. If she doesn't feel, and she was the middle child, if she doesn't feel that she has gotten all the love that she wants, then she better damn well make sure that she gets the money at the end of the day when the parents die.
Makes sense to me, really. It's a really good point you're making. Yeah. Stephen, before you keep going, I want to make sure that some others get a word in. Is that okay? So we can
I'll shut up.
No, you're good. We'll just do it in chunks. So thank you.
Okay.
Justin and then Harrison.
Yeah, just a point. I think it was on 108. I think I said something similar last time, but there's some CTF going on. She's being quiet. He's beginning to bring more immediacy to it, saying, how you feel right now. You don't like what I said, that kind of thing. And what struck me again is this sort of, when I see this, I imagine, okay, we're heading towards some sort of major mobilization, maybe toward a portrait or something. I think that's just how I clock it each time I, even with clients myself, like encounter this. That's in the back of my head. And again, he doesn't go for that. He's not interested in that because he gets somewhere even better. He gets her being very collaborative, feeling a lot of pain about her defenses, giving a lot of information. And he just kind of like milks that. He kind of just lets that go on and pulls a lot from it. So again, just very struck by this kind of pattern that I'm seeing where it seems like it's going toward a portrait, but
right. I agree with you. It's one of the main things that jump out, right? The way he prioritizes what to do isn't this, just going for a major unlocking as soon as possible. Later on, if you look at transcripts in the 90s and 2000s, he's much more about that. But this is a different animal that I really appreciate. So good. Thanks for the reminder. And it's Harrison right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's piggybacking off of what Justin said, and Johannes, I had also highlighted that phrase, creative free association, because that's something really jumped out at me with this chapter about how creative you can be in ISTDP. A lot of us, I think, kind of gain over the years this idea that there's a rigidity to ISTDP. You do this, and then you do that, and then this is the next step. But like Justin said, he didn't push for a portrait here. He got the patient to acknowledge the death wish that she had towards the sister, and that was good enough. That's enough of an unlocking to move on. And this, correct me if people disagree, but I've always had this idea in my mind that, to make triangle of person interpretation, you kind of wait, you wait till people have some spontaneous linkage themselves through their experience, and then you might recap, and that's when you make an interpretation. But I feel like in a lot of sections in this chapter, he used interpretation actually as a pressure mechanism to invite more affect in the room. So again, kind of that you can be creative. It's not lockstep. You can only do this after that. You can kind of move things around in the order.
Yeah. I can tweak that. You said it better than I could have. Really, really well put. Thank you. Interpretation as a pressure point. Lovely. Yair, you're up. You're muted. Yair, you're muted. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and Stephen comments made me like I think understand like clearer what part of the this article. And when I read it, and I read it along the way, when Davanloo, especially at the second part where he says he's starting to make interpretations and make links, and he comments that he's whenever there's a the patient is defending against the interpretations, he is relentless
Yeah.
about driving it through. And at some point, I could have wondered that this act of being relentless with the interpretation can be read by like by a way like the therapist like pushes in the interpretation on the patient, and like if the like as an authority figure that say, hey, I'm now I know something and you should agree to what I'm saying. But I think but now when I hear Stephen, I think that the purpose of it, I mean, when he makes interpretation about like feelings, like natural human feelings that can get triggered in those situations, in situation that a loved girl is now pushed back by a new sister. And the purpose for it is to like bring the patient again to feel free and confident, um, to be open with their feelings.
Yeah.
Because things when I'm saying, because the problem or the reason, if we understand why our feeling get pushed into unconscious in the unconscious, is because the child feels that it's not safe to express those feelings. It's not safe to
Right.
express the resentment towards the sister, or it's not safe to express the resentment towards the parent who she feels angry now towards, and that's why it's pushed to unconscious. And I think that the purpose, the whole point, maybe it's not to explain or make the patient understand what he feels, or understand the links, is to get the patient to like regain his confidence, to be free with those feelings out in the open. And
Yes.
and in this way, the way that like when the patient talks about it and gets and takes in the therapist's interpretation, the therapeutic effect of it is measured by the way the patient feels relieved or feel good about the ability to talk about it, to get it out in the open, in a safe environment, and not be afraid of being punished about it, or
Yes, I
something like
love
that.
that. I love that. And not only the feelings, the resentment or whatever other feelings, but even the realities. Like it can be too threatening and overwhelming for the child to even acknowledge the reality that, hey, here's actually what's going on. And so offering an interpretation is also an invitation to let in a reality that has been too frightening or painful to look at. I totally agree with you. And I mean, it's true that it can happen that when you offer an interpretation at the wrong time, it can lead to a kind of enactment or transference where the therapist is the know-it-all and or the knower and the patient is the one who doesn't. It can happen, but I would very, very much caution against codifying that into a rule as if somehow that's inevitable or that's going to happen with everybody. I really do not think that is the case. So thank you, Yair. Beautiful, beautiful point. Jamie, you're up.
Yeah, that was for me reading the article, one of the most striking things as well, just his use of interpretation. I think I counted at least 10 different occasions, and the article seemed to really at the start of it, he seemed to press for specificity. Could you say more about that? What do you mean? And then there was this transition point, I think maybe page 104, 108, somewhere about that, where he would make these interpretations. And it seemed to be, there was a point earlier based around sort of intuition as well. And it seemed to, his interpretations really seemed to be based around his understanding of what was happening in her unconscious. So, for example, there was one where he says to her, she talked about, I think, slipping out of school to go and check in on her younger sister. And he says, do you think that maybe you're overprotective of her because you also wanted to beat her up. Um,
Mm.
there's another example where she'd clawed her teacher in the face. She says, I hated her. And then he says, were you particularly angry at your mother?
Yes.
Um, so each time his interpretation really seems to be leading towards his understanding of what was happening in her unconscious.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there was a point,
Yes.
maybe around page 122, where he talks about uh, trying to, I guess, sort of work with, almost sort of like what's the minimum amount of resistance, maybe the maximum amount of resistance that we can still have. He
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily um, focused on eradicating all the resistance in order to
Mhm.
sort of move the thing forward.
Right.
So it was like, what's the minimum amount of I guess, activation in the UTA,
Yeah.
and how can we move forward, knowing that there's still going to be resistance there, but
Yeah.
in spite of that,
Yeah.
kind of what's the least amount of resistance that
Yeah.
can be there and not interfere in the process.
Yep. Yep. Not being perfectionistic about
Mm,
removing, dismantling all the resistance, and
mm,
working with what you have or what you can get. Yes, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, in the first instance that you're referencing, he's clearly hypothesizing that reaction formation is at work,
mm,
right? That she's avoiding her anger towards the sister by going to the opposite of being overly concerned and overly loving, right? So that was clearly his hypothesis there. And then with the teacher, that she clawed her face, he's obviously thinking immediately, who does that person represent?
mm,
What genetic figure does she represent in her unconscious? And he immediately offers that hypothesis or that interpretation. Yeah, so yeah, those passages stood out to me too. Thank you, Jamie. Great points. Max, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. I was it kind of builds off Jamie's point was when I read it, a lot of the interpretations are
Mhm.
actually quite intimidating to me because I think he's talking about, I believe, Oedipal complex conflicts with the sister, the competitiveness, and then also talk wanting her dead in the game and then dead at the funeral and wanting to take, I think, mummy's place in the bed and all this stuff
Yeah.
he talks about is not stuff that we get taught in our trainings because I don't have Davin is coming from the psychoanalytic background and all these
Mhm.
guys and I don't come from that background and um it doesn't come naturally to me to put these pieces together. It comes naturally to him, but not to me because I don't have that background.
Mhm.
And so the question is how to get more
Mhm.
steeped
Mhm.
in that because it in the trainings I've gone through
Mhm.
and studied with it doesn't come through. We're learning like the technique of mobilization, but this other stuff, this deeply Freudian
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
um, how can we get better at that? How can we think more like that? How can we make those links? I mean, because they're so powerful
Right.
that he's like the funeral and the game, right? Boom. And
Yeah.
wanting to take dad's place in the bed, boom. That's really powerful stuff. And for me, like I lack that and want to get it, but just some more
Yeah.
thoughts on that, you know?
Well, thanks for that, Max. Two things for me. One is there's a book called Freud and Beyond. I think Mitchell is part of the name of one of the authors or the author, I'm not sure. But Freud and Beyond is a book that is super, super accessible and it covers the gamut of psychodynamic thought. So I highly recommend Freud and Beyond. Very, very accessible. It's not dense at all. So recommend that one. The second thing that you're making me think of, Max, is how gutting and devastating it must have been for her when, after the death of the sister and the mother is hospitalized, she's spending the nights with her father in the bed. For it sounded like it was a week or two of that, and then just to be dropped like a hot potato. It sounded so harsh and cold the way he did it, and so it just made me think of how gutting that would have been for her. Let's see. Yeah, by Mitchell and Black. Yeah, I knew Mitchell. I thought, yeah, it was part of the name. Yeah. Good, good, good. Thanks, Harrison. You're a good resource. Good. Yeah, thanks, Max. Thanks for that. Let's see. Yeah, we got some time left. Anybody else? Anything? Okay. Well, while it's percolating, I'll go back to the transcript and see if something jumps out at me. Oh, did I hear a hand?
Yeah,
I did. Yair.
yeah. I had some thought about some technical aspects of the model, which during the text maybe um, I thought I maybe understand it better, and it reflected also to things I see in my practice. In page 104,
Hmm.
he describes the process,
Hmm.
and he then writes there that at some point during the intervention, the patient can have anger towards the therapist who is probing,
Hmm.
and he
Hmm.
says that then the therapist wants to bring that out into the open, the
Hmm.
feeling towards the therapist. And then he writes that once the anger towards the therapist is out in the open, he
Hmm.
writes that the therapist first shows the patient his pattern of defending himself against his anger.
Hmm.
And then he shows these are the ways he defended throughout his life in relation both to current and past people.
Yes.
And the thing about the importance of that he says, right, when the anger is getting the open, he doesn't go to portrayal or straight to how you experience it, but he said he first makes sure that the patient sees it and sees how it relates to other patients. And I think it's so important, and I see it also with my patient when I'm not doing that, the patient doesn't get any motivation of keeping the process going.
Mm.
And I think that one important aspect is once when you show the patient
Mm.
his defenses and how it relates to other relationships or how it relates to his problems, it mobilizes grief in the patient about how he's about the price of the defenses, and I think that this grief is so important in motivating the patient,
Mhm.
like to go through and say, I don't want to go on like this anymore. I want to make a change.
Totally.
And without that part, that is expiration part,
Mhm.
the process doesn't go as slowly.
Yeah, if you skimp on that piece and you just push for catharsis and breakthroughs and all of that, the therapeutic benefits don't seem to generalize, has
Yeah.
been my experience. And I so agree with you that clarifying the triangle of conflict before pushing for more affect, it does connect to their motivation so that they can see the cost of not facing their feelings and the cost of their defenses. I also think, and this is not a but an and there's something in and of itself about having greater self-understanding and self-perspective that also seems therapeutic in and of itself. I think it's probably both. Yeah. Good. Thanks for that. Iona.
Oh, I just wanted to say, just jumping on that point, I think, and again, I think we all sort of question, like, we have a moment with a client. It's like, okay, let's freeze it. Okay, so what would Johannes do here? Or what would be the best intervention here? Do I kind of go psychoed? So I'm calling this what you're saying is a bit of like psycho. It's just in the flavor of psychoed, let's say, if I can just call it that for me. It's explaining the triangle of conflict, right? It's not like, but how do you feel? But how do you feel? Okay. So I think it depends on the client. Like with some clients, they connect the dots pretty fast themselves, which is great when they do it themselves. But I think with other clients, it's helpful to leave a few breadcrumbs so they connect the dots so they can, you can strengthen the UTA and strengthen, not the UTA, but the CTA and get them to be like, tuning into the cost of it and tired of it. And then on the other end of that spectrum is people that will just comply with that and it actually thwarts the process. So I think it really,
Yeah.
I think it depends. And I mean, you tell me if you agree with me, but I think it depends. I know for me, how much connecting of the dots I do / psychoed I do really depends on, is it gonna make things better between us? Is it gonna make them, is it gonna hasten the process or speed it up, or are they just gonna comply and, check out? So isn't it possible that, again, it always depends on the particular client and how maybe psychologically aware they are, or where they are in the process, or where they are in terms of your relationship with them. Is that fair?
When are you starting your own master class? Yes.
Not.
No, that was really, really well put. Yeah, so it hinges on where you are in terms of the balance of powers. So if the resistance is in total dominion and you're not getting much collaboration at all, then to try to make these links and to say things like, do you see the connection here? Here's what happened. Then you got anxious. We were focused on your sister, and then this happened. And then do you see this? Do you see experiential psychoed, if you will? Okay. You're absolutely right that if the resistance is in total dominion, they'll just dismiss it or tune it out or begin to argue with you. And so that is so right on the money. If the resistance is that severe, you got to table that. You got to table that. Is it this transcript or another one? I can't remember. Maybe it was the German architect. Yeah, it was the German architect. He was getting really provocative. It's a different transcript. And Davanloo, he made a point of just pointing out what was happening without making any kind of experiential psycho ed, any kind of links. Like, do you see this? Or he did like, do you notice a little bit, but it was very, very minimal. So that made me think of that. Great point, Iona. Let's see. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our hour, but we still have some time. We got like maybe 3 minutes left before I have to jump. So if anyone has a burning desire to share something or make a remark, go for it. Robert.
Want to speak to the way the group is working. What a privilege it is to be here with so many experienced people sharing your perspectives, even if they're this way or that way. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Johannes, for bringing it together.
Thanks. I'm very touched by that. Thank you. I feel the same way. I'm very touched. This is quite a bit of fun for me. Thanks, Harrison. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. That's cool. These emojis, I don't know if they're AI based or I've never seen them. Right. I don't know if, yeah, Rachel was able to do a bunch of hearts and Harrison did a heart. So thanks. I'm glad that it's, yeah, that there's some value here. So that's wonderful. I'll be in touch soon, like within probably a few days, maybe 5, with the next reading. And let's see, Max, I know you said that your training didn't involve heavy psychodynamic training. No, it doesn't come out naturally. But I did see you point out a slip in Johannes. Yeah, man, absolutely. You caught my potential Freudian slip there when I said patient instead of parents. That's funny. Thanks, Bo. Good point. Yeah, you might be more psychodynamically savvy than you give yourself credit for, Max. I don't know where Max went now, but anyway, all right. So I got to jump, but we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Thanks for hanging out. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks.